Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
This is Business Today, live from New York, where markets are opening up over optimism about the government shutdown's end. Drill, baby, drill. Oil and gas demand is set to rise annually for the next 25 years, reflecting a shift in U.S. policy. And breaking records, the UK music industry tops the charts for money earned and jobs created in 2024. Welcome to Business Today, live from New York. I'm Erin Delmore. Markets have opened higher here in New York as investors are cautiously optimistic about a likely end to the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. And also, an upbeat earnings outlook from Advanced Micro Devices has revived optimism around the AI trade. The tech sector had recently taken a hit over fears of inflated valuations. I'm joined now by Phil Palumbo, CEO and CIO of Palumbo Wealth Management. Phil, you could say it's a long time coming. Let's start with the end of the government shutdown. Would that be a chance for investors to cheer, or has the whole episode just eroded faith in government stability?
I kind of been in the camp that it's been a non-issue the whole time. I mean, as long as it's gone on, which is the longest ever, they've created some volatility, I think, at the end of this. But at the end of the day, the focus really is on this AI build out, the focus is on earnings, and the focus is on interest rates. And those are the three key things as investors that we're looking at.
And you and I both know that those three things are tied together. So let's talk about tech valuations for a moment. We see the sector up, we see it down, today up again. What do you see about the long-term potential in that industry? Put very simply, is it overvalued?
Yeah, so the most important thing that investors really have to think about is when everybody's saying there's a bubble, normally you don't have a bubble. So that's the first thing. So you always want to think more a contrarian view. And then when you start to really dig into the numbers and peel the onion back, you say to yourself, okay, from a valuation perspective, back in 1999, you had Cisco, you had Intel, Lucent Technologies. They were trading at forward multiples of 150 to 200 times. Today, the hyperscalers minus Tesla are trading 30 to 40 times. So we're really from the area that's where you see most of the hype. You're not really trading at ridiculous valuations, number one. And number two, the cash flow, the free cash flow of these businesses are much greater than they were back in 1999. We're still in the early innings of AI. That doesn't mean you're not going to have volatility, but there's still a ways to go as it relates to technology investing.
Nice. So tell me where you see pockets of value in this market.
Yeah, so right now, when you think about the S&P 500, 76% of companies are actually underperforming the S&P 500 market cap index. Of that, about 50% of them are actually negatively returning. So where I find value today is, Berkshire Hathaway, to me, looks really interesting at these levels. I think there's just been a lot of negative sentiment around Buffett leaving, but ultimately, Berkshire Hathaway is really a terrific business. What you're getting with Berkshire is private business, multiple private companies that are terrific businesses, as well as public companies. When you blend it all together, you're almost getting a diversified portfolio. It's lagged the overall S&P 500. I think you see sentiment turn positive overall with Berkshire. So I love that from an entry standpoint. I also like Costco here. Right, Costco has come down off its high about 10% or greater. Still trading at a pretty rich multiple, but overall, when you factor in the dominance of Costco and the membership and the profit margins around that, the growth of the business around 7 to 8%, I see value there. So as you start to, and we start to move away from technology, there are other areas, not just AI, where I think you can make money.
All right, Phil Palumbo, thank you very much for taking the time with us. See you soon.
Thank you.
There could be a sharp rise in demand for fossil fuels for decades. That's according to a new study from the International Energy Agency. Its annual World Energy Outlook. The report said the IEA said the global oil and gas demand could grow until 2050. They added under current global policies, oil demand will hit 113 million barrels per day by mid-century. That's up around 13% from 2024 consumption. The report shows that this increase in renewable energy could meet nearly all the world's growing appetite for electricity, which is on track to rise by 40% over the next decade, fueled by the growing demand for electric cars. So joining me now to discuss is Robert Palmer, Deputy Director at Uplift, which supports a rapid and fair transition away from oil and gas production in the UK. Now, Robert, we've talked about your organization's worldview, the need to move away from oil and gas production. So tell us what you make of this development and this moment.
Yes, so obviously some of the momentum around efforts to tackle climate change is slipping with backsliding from countries like the United States. But the big picture, and you can see this in the IEA report, is a rapid rollout of renewables. And that is the future. You know, that is how we have cheaper bills, we have more reliable energy, and we can also help mitigate some of the worst impacts of climate change. The headline that we will continue to rely on quite that much oil and gas is based on a scenario the IEA have developed, I think partly because of pressure from the United States. And that scenario, you know, that we'll continue to be pumping lots of oil and gas is based on some pretty shaky assumptions, including that, for example, electric vehicles will only really be bought in China and Europe, when actually on the ground you can see something very different. So I think, you know, there are definitely things that we need to be concerned about. And you know, 2024 was the hottest year on record. But the trend across the world is towards ever cheaper renewables and rolling out of that renewable technology.
So what conversation do you think you and I are having, say, 20 years from now?
Well, I mean, I think what we're going to see is much, much cheaper renewable energy. That will be the future. You know, that is the reason why places like China and Texas are rolling out renewables. We'll have much wider adoption of electric vehicles. We will have other forms of technology that we just can't imagine at the moment. You know, the scale and speed at which renewables have been rolled out is really impressive. I mean, I think also at the same time, it's important to be realistic that we are going to continue to see the impact of devastating climate change. And you've just seen it with the hurricane that just went through Jamaica. We'll see more and more places that will be hard to insure. And that's why we need to double down on pushing towards renewable technology and not pumping more oil and gas. You know, in my country, in the UK government has got a big climate test on whether it approves a massive new oil field called Rosebank. This is a bad deal for the UK, bad deal for our economy, bad deal for the climate. The future is in renewables, even if we've got some bumps in the road and some backsliding from countries like the United States.
Robert Palmer, thanks for sharing your thoughts. See you soon. Now, the UK music industry is raking in more cash and employing more people than ever before. So if you were one of the tens of thousands of people to go see Taylor Swift or Bruce Springsteen last year, you helped UK music's contribution to the UK economy to the tune of some £8 billion. That's over $10 billion. And that's according to the latest figures from the voice of the UK music industry, called UK Music, who also show the industry employing a record high 220,000 people in 2024. Now, earlier we spoke to Tom Keel, Chief Executive of UK Music, and he took us through the numbers.
Well, it was a very good year last year. I mean, growth was up 5%, both in terms of exports, but also our wider economic contribution, also nudging up 2% in terms of employment. However, I think there are some, that is great, but actually growth hasn't actually been as big as it was at the beginning of the decade, actually. We had the pandemic, and after the pandemic, there was an actual boom, double-digit growth. So although growth is still good within the sector, it's perhaps not as strong last year as perhaps we'd like, and maybe there's some underlying issues there we need to tackle.
To the skincare business now, which is seemingly always coming up with new ingredients. One currently leading the pack is vitamin C, which is widely known to be good in your diet, and it can also apparently be good for your skin. But sourcing the vitamins sustainably can pose a problem. That's where the latest advances in biotechnology step in, according to the global skincare brand Garnier. My colleague Julia Caesar has been speaking to its president, Mark Balland.
So what is the biotech vitamin C? In a nutshell, it's as effective as classic vitamin C, but much more natural and sustainable than before. It uses 1,000 times less natural resources, so the same amount of vitamin C that you can obtain from, I would say, lemon and citrus.
Sourcing your products is going to be essential going forward. Have tariffs had an impact on that?
We are localized in 64 countries in the world, and the good thing is that we have factories in 16 different countries, so in every continent. So we are able to produce our product very close to the markets, to have a very local competitive price, and to be very close to our consumer needs.
Some countries are not going to perform as well as others. Where are you struggling?
It's very driven first by emerging countries that are really our driving force. You know, Mexico, India, and South Asia overall. But we are doing well as well in Europe and in the USA. So overall, I would say it's quite a positive and very dynamic trend as we speak on Garnier.
How do you innovate continually to be able to offer new products?
Our challenge is how could we combine, being a legacy brand, for 120 years and still being relevant for consumers, in tune with the times, keep innovating and capturing the new trends. We have labs everywhere in the world, in the US, in Brazil, in South Africa, in India, and in Europe. So having different labs and Garnier labs everywhere in the world is a real competitive advantage. It means that we can capture, innovation and trends everywhere in the world.
Now, digital is definitely disrupting the beauty industry. How are influencers changing how you retail your products?
So in fact, you can be a global brand and very relevant thanks to the power of local creators and advocacy. Because at the end of the day, they promote the products and the quality of the products. So if you have superior products, superior texture and safety, they love to talk about it. And they do it, in fact, much better than us because they do it with a local relevancy and they are closer to their consumers.
Do we really need all of these different beauty products?
Consumers crave beauty. Beauty is very important for them. It's a way to give them confidence. It's a way to feel good as well. And it's what they love in our products.
In other news now, the UK's biggest building society, the Nationwide, has pledged to keep all of its 696 branches open until at least the end of the decade. This is a 2-year extension to the promise it had already made not to close branches after it reported a rise in customers using them in the last year. The UK bank and building society sector has seen widespread branch closures in recent years. The U.S. has stopped making pennies from today. President Trump called them wasteful, costing 4 cents each to produce. Businesses have been rounding up prices, and the move is expected to save the U.S. Mint $56 million a year. Pennies remain legal, but won't be minted anymore. And PayPal is relaunching in the UK for customers to shop online and in stores almost 2 years after it restructured its operations following Brexit. The firm has announced it's launching its first ever debit and credit cards alongside a new loyalty scheme, all of which will include no transaction fees. And finally, Labubu dolls were flying off the shelves on a shopping live stream in London on Tuesday as Alibaba's AliExpress bought China's Singles' Day shopping frenzy over to Britain. Pop Mart's Labubu, Crybaby, and Skull Panda dolls sold in sealed blind boxes have become a global hit, fueling a surge in revenues for the Beijing-based company. That's all for us. Stay with us here on BBC News.